Despite a century of predictions, humanity never triggered a full nuclear Third World War. It wasn't morality that prevented it, it was reason. Every nation holding nuclear weapons operated under mutually assured destruction. A full exchange guaranteed not victory, but complete self-annihilation. Nuclear arsenals stayed deterrents and were never used as weapons. By the late 21st century, the cost of maintaining large arsenals grew higher than the political value they provided. The catastrophe everyone feared simply never aligned with any strategic benefit. There was no cyberpunk dystopia either, because invasive technology never became a mainstream trend. No one was willing to undergo permanent surgical modification. Implants were expensive, medically risky, difficult to maintain, and impossible to upgrade without another procedure. Civilization slowly shifted toward green technology, but not out of kindness. It happened because the old industrial model stopped working. Governments and corporations adopted cleaner technologies not to save the planet, but because they were cheaper, more stable, and less vulnerable to disruption. What emerged wasn't an eco-utopia, but a form of green capitalism. Sustainability adopted only when the alternatives collapsed under their own cost. Colonizing space began as tiny and extremely expensive projects. It was economically rational to let machines do almost everything because space is lethal and life support is costly. Human presence remained minimal in the early stages, while automated systems handled construction and mining in hostile environments. Full general intelligence had not yet emerged, but this era was defined by powerful, focused systems that quietly replaced entire layers of labor. Humanity never formed a unified world government. The idea of a single planetary authority appeared many times in fiction, but real history never supported it. Human political systems followed a pattern that never breaks. Tribes became city-states, city-states became nations, nations became blocks, and blocks eventually fragmented. Instead of one global empire, the world evolved into overlapping systems of cooperation, regional unions similar to a European Union. Humanity was no longer bound by reproduction-driven expansion. As lifespans increased, the evolutionary pressure to reproduce weakened, and population growth stopped being an urgent need. Medical technology and bioengineering was extending lifespans far beyond historical limits, and with increased lifespans, human demography changed completely. Generations overlapped for much longer, cultural memory deepened, and societies became more stable, but also slower to change. People with centuries ahead of them made decisions differently. Long-term investments became normal, and risk-taking declined. The idea of a short human life, once the foundation of culture and urgency, no longer applied. The real shift started with the technological singularity. This was not a single event, but a long transition that became one of the most important transformations in human history. Humans have always outsourced complexity to their new tools. Agriculture outsourced food production. Money outsourced trust. Writing outsourced memory. Computers outsourced calculation. AI followed this exact trajectory. It became essential because of how complex the energy networks, manufacturing systems, scientific research, and space operations had become. And most importantly, it enabled the construction of systems no human could maintain with biological labor. Megastructures in space. Massive solar arrays, automated orbital shipyards, space elevators, and the rotating space habitats. Space is hostile, radiation, vacuum, and extreme temperatures, and every human specialist required extremely costly and sophisticated life support. Machines didn't need air or water, only energy, so they became the natural builders of civilization beyond Earth. Humanity needed these megastructures because its energy demand finally outgrew the planet. By the 25th and 26th centuries, Earth's surface could no longer support the computation, industry, and global infrastructure required. The only scalable resource was sunlight in space, where solar power is abundant, constant, and unfiltered. AI-built collectors and energy laser transmitters became humankind's new energy supply. The Singularity wasn't an explosion or a sudden leap into a new form of intelligence. It was a slow integration that began around the 2020s. A gradual shift where artificial intelligence became so embedded in daily life that it stopped being a tool and became the environment itself. AI ran fabrication, communications, research, and eventually everything else. Humans no longer controlled these systems, they lived inside them. It meant that intelligence no longer belonged exclusively to biological minds. Machine intelligence could scale where biology could not. It could think in parallel, fork itself into thousands of variations, redesign its own architecture, and store perfect memory without decay. One mind could become 100 and then merge back into one, carrying the experience of all threads. Humans adapted to this stage of evolution, and their thought patterns changed. Decision-making became collaborative between human intuition and machine reasoning. And even with far superior cognition, AGI never turned into the kind of self-motivated force people once feared it would be. Every major tool in human history forced society to restructure, and AI became the tool that was shaping humanity. Fire created healthier bodies and new social hierarchies. Metallurgy created new ruling classes. The printing press erased the church monopoly on knowledge. The internet reshaped political influence. And AI, the first tool to outsource cognition, created an entire new environment that humans could live in just as earlier humans lived inside forests, plains, and cities. Tools usually also change what groups can do together, increasing cooperation possibilities. Fire supported tribes, writing supported states, printing supported nations. And when a tool makes something easier or safer, humans always scale it up. AI was no exception. Only this time, with the ability to harvest energy directly from the star, it expanded the scale of cooperation beyond nations and into an interplanetary civilization. Humans have always expanded into new frontiers whenever old ones became saturated. It never mattered if the frontier was dangerous, dirty, or destabilizing. Cities brought disease, industry brought pollution, but each step increased the scale of civilization. Throughout history, scale always outperformed stability. Small, stable tribes were wiped out by weather, famine, and predators. Unstable, crowded cities survived longer. Dirty, dangerous industrial societies lifted billions out of poverty. Overwhelming digital systems, despite their cognitive overload, now held civilization together. Stability is comfortable, but scale is resilient. A species with intelligence like ours increases its long-term survival only by expanding outward, even at the cost of individual comfort. Human natural curiosity never switched off. It only stopped being a trait tied to reproduction and basic survival. Even as fertility collapsed globally, humanity found new ways to expand through machine labor and AI-directed construction. Humans became the seed, and technology became the branches. People grew increasingly afraid of leaving their comfort zones because risk was outsourced to infrastructure. Low-risk individuals thrived, natural explorers became rare. The next stage of this trend, where machines took over the frontier work, was simply inevitable. Deep space became the next frontier for the same ancient reasons as every frontier before it: resource scarcity and economic pressure. Earth had limits. Rare metals used for superconductors and quantum hardware were exhausted. energy demand outgrew planetary production, and advanced industries required vacuum environments and microgravity manufacturing that could only be done off-world. Asteroids contained more platinum group metals than all of Earth's mines combined. Solar power in orbit was hundreds of times more efficient than anything on the surface. The digital economy alone required computation on a scale Earth could no longer support. Deep space wasn't an explorer's dream. It was the only place with enough material, energy, and room for civilization's next stage. And humans couldn't settle there directly, but their tools could. By the 33rd century, political lines long stopped being the main division of the human world. Left and right, liberal and conservative, nation against nation, all of these were short-lived cultural overlays. The deeper splits came from something older than politics: specialization and environment. Political conflict had always been a symptom of incompatible groups forced to share the same space. When people with different survival needs live under one system, they fight over that system. But once they stop sharing environments, they stop needing the same rules, and politics dissolved. Humanity grew the way life grows itself, from a single pattern into a tangled body of countless branches. Expansion created specialization, and specialization made permanent unity impossible. The world fractured into niches, each shaping its own kind of human. Megacity citizens grew deeply integrated with AI-managed systems. Off-world communities on Mars, in orbit, and in asteroid habitats adapted to frontier scarcity and high autonomy. Digital-first societies lived primarily in virtual environments. Traditional enclaves maintained high fertility and conservative cultural values. These groups no longer wanted the same things. They didn't share the same pressures or the same concept of a good life. Political identity weakened because deeper identities took over, environmental identities that lasted centuries. Most political battles of early humanity were fights over resources, but AI automation absorbed much of that friction. Resource allocation became algorithmic. When systems solved the friction, politics lost its fuel. It became a hobby, not a survival conflict. When people could choose where and how to live with unprecedented freedom, physical, virtual, or hybrid, they sorted themselves not by nationality, but by temperament and values. People grouped with others who thought like them, built environments around shared preferences, and over generations became psychologically distinct. A child raised on Mars did not think like a child raised in a VR-dominant megacity or in a traditional enclave. The result was not one humanity, but several parallel humanities. And as centuries turned into thousands of years, their differences stopped being temporary adaptations and became evolutionary paths. Biology followed the environment, just as it always had. Meanwhile, digital-first societies changed in a way no biological lineage ever could. Many gradually abandoned permanent physical embodiment altogether. Minds existed as cognitive patterns across the AI infrastructure they lived inside. For these populations, biological evolution effectively stopped. They became post-biological descendants of humanity. With near immortality available to many groups, procreation became rare. Some lineages stopped reproducing entirely and continued by maintaining and modifying their existing minds. Over tens of thousands of years, these diverged populations became so distinct, genetically, cognitively, and culturally, that they no longer formed a single species. Humanity branched into multiple subspecies, each adapted to its own niche: planetary, orbital, and hybrid forms of existence. Eventually, these branches came to be known as the lineages, great arcs of descent that traced back to a common ancestral humanity, but evolved along different trajectories. What unified them was not biology, but memory. A shared archive reaching back to a time when all lineages were still one species. And far in the future, 1,000,000 years beyond the early divergence, only one of these lineages would come to dominate the solar system. The Sol lineage, descendants of the orbital and post-biological branches. It is the year 1,036,005, deep in the Stelliferous era, and you are one of the Sol lineage. Your existence takes place inside the constructs of the Dyson swarm, surrounding the star named Sol. Humans of your kind no longer inhabit planets. You live within megastructures designed to harvest and distribute stellar energy, all built and maintained by autonomous intelligence. Its infrastructure does not produce air, water, or any biological medium, and neither do you require any. Your embodiment is synthetic and digital, chosen upon need. When you inhabit a body, it needs no life support, no radiation shielding, no food, no atmosphere. Biology was phased out long ago because maintaining organic life proved highly inefficient. Your language doesn't use sound. Sound requires atmosphere, and your environment hasn't contained one for hundreds of thousands of years. Most of the time, you exist as a pattern distributed across the swarm. Your environment is partly physical, partly computational substrate, tightly merged with an AI environment that has been operating for ages. The concept of daily life is irrelevant to you, but you still perceive the passage of time. Your desires and motives are purely cognitive: continuity of identity, reduction of uncertainty, creation of structure, and the expansion of understanding. These properties emerge naturally in any advanced thinking system, biological or artificial. To understand how you became what you are, you study the archives. Whether you are AI or human descendant is mostly a historical distinction. Everything begins at the point where your history is still recognizable as language, before the divergence into subspecies, before the lineages.